Just when Prince Harry reportedly believed the door back into royal life was finally beginning to crack open, King Charles appeared to slam it shut without saying a single word, and that silence may have been louder than any public rejection imaginable. For months, whispers of reconciliation floated through royal circles like a carefully planted promise. Stories emerged, suggesting conversations were happening behind the scenes. Sources spoke about open channels. Commentators speculated that after years of tension, perhaps father and son were slowly finding their way back toward each other. It sounded hopeful. It sounded possible. And perhaps most importantly, it sounded like exactly the story Harry needed people to believe. Because if there was no path back, then what exactly was Harry moving toward? That question now hangs over everything. The timing could not be more dramatic. With Invictus approaching and Harry once again preparing to stand in the spotlight, many believe this would be the perfect moment for a symbolic royal thaw. A quiet meeting, a private conversation, maybe even the beginning of a new chapter. But instead, what seems to be emerging is something very different. Not reconciliation, not negotiation, closure. And what makes this story so fascinating is that the palace never had to announce it. The monarchy has always played a different game from everyone else. Politicians argue, celebrities respond, public figures defend themselves, but institutions that have survived centuries rarely rush. They simply wait. They observe. They let events unfold. Then they communicate through actions rather than words, and right now the actions appear impossible to ignore. According to multiple reports, Harry reportedly continued believing that some form of reunion remained achievable. After all, he is still Charles's son. Blood is blood. Family is family. Those bonds do not simply disappear overnight. Yet the deeper you look into the reports emerging from royal insiders, the more a disturbing pattern begins to appear. There seems to be a growing gap between what Harry hopes is happening and what the institution believes should happen. That gap may be enormous, because while King Charles may still love his son as a father, the monarchy increasingly appears to view Harry through a completely different lens. And that changes everything. Think about the impossible position Charles now occupies. He is not merely a father managing a family disagreement. He is a monarch navigating enormous challenges. His health remains a concern. The monarchy itself is evolving. Public expectations are shifting. Prince William and Catherine are becoming increasingly central to the future structure of the crown. Every decision Charles makes now carries consequences far beyond personal emotions. That is why some royal observers believe the real story is not whether Charles loves Harry. The real story is whether the institution trusts him. And according to reports from those close to the situation, trust may be the one thing that no longer exists. That word keeps appearing again and again. Trust, or rather the lack of it. The palace may be willing to tolerate criticism, it may endure controversy, it may even survive scandals, but trust, once broken, becomes something far harder to rebuild, especially when the people involved believe private conversations can eventually become public headlines, especially when every interaction carries the possibility of future exposure, especially after years of interviews, documentaries, books, and allegations. From the institution's perspective, the calculation appears brutally simple. Emotion is one thing, risk is another, and institutions are designed to manage risk. That brings us directly to the person many believe holds even more influence over this situation than Charles himself, Prince William. Because while Charles may still carry a father's instincts, William carries memories. And memories are powerful things. The reports surrounding William paint a picture that is strikingly different from the reconciliation narratives dominating headlines. Multiple commentators suggest that William's position has hardened dramatically over the years, not temporarily, permanently. That distinction matters. A temporary disagreement can be repaired. A permanent decision is something else entirely. Several royal journalists have suggested that William has emotionally moved beyond the conflict altogether. Not because he forgave it, not because he resolved it, but because he reached a point where continuing to engage simply no longer seemed worthwhile. And if those reports are accurate, then Harry faces a challenge far greater than repairing a damaged relationship. He faces the reality that one of the most important people in the future monarchy may no longer see a path back at all. That reality creates a fascinating contradiction, because every reconciliation story assumes there are two sides moving toward each other. But what happens if only one side is moving? What happens if one person is trying to reopen a chapter while the other person already considers the book finished? That is where this story becomes genuinely explosive. Because the future of Harry's relationship with the monarchy may not depend on emotional gestures anymore. It may depend on institutional realities. And institutions rarely operate on sentiment. They operate on confidence. They operate on stability. They operate on predictability. Right now, the signals coming from royal circles suggest those priorities matter more than family nostalgia. Meanwhile, Harry reportedly continues facing another major obstacle that complicates every reconciliation conversation: Meghan. Whether fair or unfair, nearly every discussion surrounding Harry's potential return eventually circles back to her. And according to reports from royal insiders, her presence remains one of the most sensitive subjects in the entire equation. That creates a difficult situation. Because if Harry views his future as inseparable from Meghan, while sections of the institution reportedly view Meghan as part of the problem, then every attempt at reconciliation immediately runs into the same wall, the same tension, the same deadlock, the same impossible question: how do you rebuild a relationship when the conditions required by one side are exactly the conditions the other side refuses to accept? And that question is becoming increasingly difficult to avoid, because the closer Invictus gets, the more attention these unresolved issues attract. The more people ask what happens next, the more speculation grows, the more silence from the palace begins to feel deliberate. And perhaps that is the most revealing clue of all. Not what Charles is saying, but what Charles isn't saying. But the deeper mystery is not whether Harry can return. The deeper mystery is whether the royal family even wants him to. And that is where this story takes an even darker turn. Because every major sign coming from palace circles seems to point in the same direction. Not anger, not revenge, not even active hostility. Something far more dangerous: indifference. There is a difference between fighting someone and moving on from them. A fight means the relationship still matters. A battle means emotions are still alive. But when people stop fighting altogether, when they stop reacting, when they stop responding, that is often the moment the real ending begins. And many observers now believe Harry may be confronting exactly that reality. Not a palace preparing for reconciliation, a palace preparing for permanence. The tragedy, according to many royal watchers, is that Harry may only now be realizing how much has changed while he was gone. The monarchy he left is not the monarchy that exists today. William and Catherine have become the unquestioned center of the institution's future. Their children are growing into public roles. New priorities have emerged. New structures are taking shape. New loyalties have solidified. Time did not pause while Harry built a new life in California. The machine kept moving. The institution kept adapting. The family kept evolving. And perhaps the most painful realization of all is that they learned how to function without him. That reality becomes impossible to ignore when looking at the next generation. George, Charlotte, Louis. They are being raised inside the system. Every public appearance reinforces their place within the monarchy's future. Every royal event strengthens their connection to the institution. Meanwhile, Harry's children are growing up thousands of miles away from the world that once defined their father's life. No dramatic announcement removed them. No official decree changed their bloodline. Yet with every passing year, the distance grows larger, and distance has a strange way of becoming permanent when enough time passes. That is why Invictus suddenly feels so important, not simply because it is Harry's greatest achievement, not simply because veterans deserve recognition for their courage and resilience, but because Invictus may now carry a burden it was never designed to carry. It is no longer just a charitable mission. It has become the foundation supporting Harry's public identity, and that creates enormous pressure. Because every question about sponsorships, leadership changes, governance concerns, or financial challenges suddenly becomes more than a charity story. It becomes a Harry story. The irony is impossible to miss. Invictus was supposed to stand above personal drama. It was supposed to be about service, about sacrifice, about veterans overcoming impossible odds. Yet as July approaches, headlines continue focusing on Harry's family conflict rather than the athletes themselves. The attention keeps drifting back to the palace, back to Charles, back to William, back to Meghan.